Good evening and welcome to tonight's City of Burnside Council meeting of the 28th of March 2023, opening at 7 p.m. Welcome to everyone here and to those who are watching from home. Before we begin, please turn off your mobile phones or place them on silent so that the meeting is not disturbed, and masks, if you wish them, are in the middle of the table in here. Please stand and remain silent during the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the original custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to all those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We also consider in our thoughts all those who today are being affected by war around the globe, and especially those in Ukraine. Finally, we seek guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. You will need to use your microphone as a reminder to register your intent to enter the debate and wait till I've asked you to speak. Please turn off your microphone when you have finished speaking and be respectful and patient while listening to each speaker and not interrupt or interject during the debate. Each person has 3 minutes with a warning bell at 2. I just ask you again to be mindful of not making commentary to each other whilst a member is addressing the council. Moving straight to absences, and our only absence tonight is Councillor Cornish. We don't have any leave of absence. Is there anyone who wishes to declare any conflict of interest? No? Then I'll move to confirmation of minutes. I need someone to move that the minutes be received unless anyone has an issue. That is Councillor Henschke. You wish to move? And seconded by Councillor Zing. No commentary. We will go. I'll just put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We have no public question time, but we do have a number of deputations this evening. The first one is from Mr. Frank Banks, and I'll ask Mr. Banks to come forward to the seat in the middle and just announce your name and suburb. You don't actually have to give your full address, Mr. Banks, and then you can tell us what it is that you've come to talk to us about tonight. Yes, I'll just turn mine off and then you're on.
Is now. Hi, my name's Frank Banks and I live in Erindale, Godfrey Terrace, up near Hallett Road. I would like to address the council regarding the car park at Belliot Reserve that St Peter's Girls has been using for some years. I believe that's due, the lease is due for renewal soon. I'd just like to ask council that any renewal of the car park lease would be commensurate with the school similarly offering back the community access to their facilities, most notably the new indoor sports facility that they should have completed in 18 months to 2 years' time. For many years there's been a gymnastics club that has used the existing indoor sports hall. They of course are moving out and they're hoping to get a permanent facility, but it'll be some distance away, and we really desperately need some indoor sports facilities in the area. So rather than maybe paying you $1 a year or something, I'm hoping that the renewal of the car park would be dependent on them renting out their indoor sporting facilities and maybe even their top oval. And that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Is there anyone who wishes to ask a question? Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Frank. Can you give us a timeline when the new gym will be ready for occupation?
I'm not involved with the gym club anymore. I'm doing gridiron stuff. But I believe that they'll be knocking it down at the end of term 3 this year. It'll be an 18-month construction period. So the gymnastics club called Saints Gym Club are planning moving somewhere else. I don't know where.
So that looks like the end of 2024 or early 2025.
Yes,
Okay.
I would imagine.
Thank you.
Councillor Turnbull?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Banks. Just wondered, has this facility been offered to the gym club?
Going back some years, there was much discussion between the school and the club, including possibilities of a double-storey building that was never going to work because it would have shaded out Ferguson Reserve. To the best of my knowledge, the gym club has not been invited back. So what concerns me is that they, in doing that, the school may have no plans to provide adequate on-site storage for community sports clubs that might want to use them. Currently, Saints Gym Club has access to storage on site, and it's 10% larger than 2 40-foot containers. It's an area that basically stretches most of the way across the netball court, and it's about 2.4 metres deep, and it's about 2.4 metres tall, and it's about 3 metres deep. It's no good just saying, oh yes, you can come and hire our hall if you've got to turn up with a flatbed truck in a container all the time. That just doesn't work. It's all right if you're a badminton team. You know, the captain can turn up with something equivalent to a cricket bag, and that's got pretty much all their equipment, but not for something like a gymnastics club.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Thank you for coming along tonight. Can I just clarify a couple of things? What size club do you have, and how many members, and what sort of activities do you do? I don't have any knowledge, so I just need a bit more
I am
Thanks.
slightly dated. Only involvement these days is every once in a while if they need some serious maintenance, I might get asked to go up. Saints Gym Club has run on Monday nights, Thursday nights, Friday nights and Saturday afternoons. They offer girls competitive gymnastics, also referred to as WAG, some competitive boys known as MAG, men's artistic gymnastics, tumbling, most importantly a program called Gym for All, which is your children who turn up 1 hour a week. That's really the backbone of gymnastics financially and numbers. I believe that age group, of course, is quite young. We don't run any kinder gym, but sometimes you might have children about 4.5. The numbers start thinning out in the 12 to 13 age group, although with tumbling, and they've also done some aerobic gymnastics, they've managed to keep some girls and boys getting a bit older than that. Numbers wise, I think we'd be talking 350 to 400. So it's quite sizable. Gymnastics used to like to boast that we fit more children in per square metre than any other sport, and that was terrific until somebody invented COVID. It then made us work really hard.
Thank you. Councillor Turnbull, we have another question.
Another question. What are you asking for or hoping for from our council?
That if the school seems to be reluctant to put a car park on their oval, but they've been quite happy to put classrooms there because I guess that generates more money. That land really should be bushland. It's not. If the school wishes to continue to be able to use that bushland for a car park and things such as the tennis courts at Belliet, and I guess even it's not unusual for them to be doing things at Newland Reserve, that they should be similarly offering back to the community, and not just, oh yes, you know, the top over you can have some junior soccer kids train there on a Sunday, but you know, something really serious like a gymnastics club, which involves a heck of a lot of equipment, and badminton. There's been a karate club there. I also believe for many, many years. I got involved about 2007, and there's always been badminton and karate. Badminton and karate probably would have a greater chance of fitting into an old church hall somewhere, but not gymnastics. You really do need something of substance.
All right, well, look, thank you very much for coming in, Mr. Banks.
Thank you, ma'am.
And now we'll move to our second deputation, and that deputation is, I'll just make this paper, is from Mr. Martin Godfrey. And you have done a deputation before, Mr. Godfrey, so I know you're familiar.
Okay. My name's Martin Godfrey. My name's Martin Godfrey. I live in Kensington Park, and I'm here today to make a deputation about the provision of wheelchair spaces in the Regal Theatre. Earlier in the month, I went to a concert at the Regal Theatre as part of the Adelaide Fringe. As I'd not been in the theatre since the seats were upgraded, I checked the venue accessibility on the Fringe website. If you look at page 2, you'll see the information that came up. It identifies the theatre as having 4 wheelchair spaces, some in the back row and some in the front row. When I attended the concerts, I found there were no such wheelchair spaces. I contacted Burnside Council staff about the lack of wheelchair spaces and was told I would need to sit in an aisle. If you look at page 3, you'll see a picture of me sitting in the side aisle alongside the emergency exit. You'll see I almost completely blocked the side aisle, so people would have to squeeze past me. This was also the situation with the old seating, and there have been many occasions in the past where people have crashed into me in the dark when going in or out during a film. I feel this is an unacceptable situation from both fire safety and disability discrimination perspectives. How would each of you feel if you were forced to watch a film from a chair in one of the aisles? Moving on to slide 4. Taking fire safety considerations first, I'm sure if I write to the Metropolitan Fire Service, they will say it's not acceptable for a wheelchair user to sit in an emergency egress route. The requirements on egress routes are defined in the South Australia's Ministry's specification, SA 76. This calls up the National Construction Codes. The codes specify an unobstructed width of at least 1 metre. If a wheelchair user is sitting in an aisle, the unobstructed width is far less than 1 metre. Moving on to page 5, and Disability Discrimination Act considerations. Standards for disabled access to buildings are legislated under the DDA and specify how public buildings must provide access for people living with a disability. Again, the National Construction Codes are called up. The codes include a table which specifies the number and grouping of wheelchair spaces. As the Regal has a total of over 300 seats, at least 75% of those spaces must be in rows other than the front row. If you go on to page 6, you'll see the seating arrangement on the lower floor. There are 8 rows of seats. The 3 rows at the front are on level flooring, and the rear 5 rows are on a sloping rake floor. The seating itself is modular, with a support between each seat to secure the seats to the floor. So how easy would it be to remove the end seat of each of these rows? If you go to page 5, you'll see the underside of the seats. On the end row, there are 2 bolts securing the armrest and 2 bolts securing one side of the seat. Between each seats, there are 2 bolts securing the armrest and 4 bolts securing the seats. So to remove the end row seat, all that would be required is to undo the 4 bolts securing the seat, the 2 bolts securing the armrest, and unbolt the support from the floor. Moving on to page 8, provision of wheelchair spaces in the rear row. Seats would need to be removed and a levelling platform added to compensate for the slope of the floor. The levelling platform could be a simple timber construction sitting on top of the heritage floor. So finally, page 9. In summary, the fire safety issues need to be dealt with urgently. I suggest this is done by removing the front seats in the front 3 rows. In the longer term, wheelchair spaces and other disabled access improvements should be included as part of the Regal Theatre master plan. These improvements should have been done when the old heritage seating was ripped out and new seating put in, but obviously this was an oversight. It is also been noted that lack of wheelchair spaces and other access inclusion issues were not identified in the June 2022 accessibility audit of council buildings and facilities, calling into question the integrity of that audit. Okay, that's it.
Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Davey? Sorry. No, councillors. Yes, Councillor Davey.
Thank you very much for coming along tonight, Mr. Godfrey. Can you tell me what... firstly, I'm embarrassed that you had this...
Oversights occur.
this experience coming to a fringe, because we're so proud that the theatre is being used for fringe activities and you know, so has such widespread acceptance. Do you think this is readily rectifiable, that with your suggestions, that could happen in a few weeks with some sort of architectural engineering support and advice from us at council?
The removal of the end row seats is a fairly simple matter. It's just a matter of undoing a few bolts because the seats are bolted into the floor and bolted to the support stands. But I think probably more longer term, something needs to be done to look at it in a more holistic manner. But the fire safety considerations really need to be dealt with urgently, and it's fairly simple.
Councillor Zing?
Thanks for coming in, Martin. Just a quick question referring to the seating plan on this page here. Would you be then saying it would be best practice for us in the interim to remove sort of A1, B1, C1, D1, like the first four?
That's it,
That's
yes.
what you're referring to?
Yes, the front 3 rows, the end seat.
Is there anyone else who wishes to ask a question? I haven't anyone here, so I will thank you very much for coming in and invite the next deputy, who is Leanne Isaacson from Eastwood Community Centre.
Hi, I'm Leanne Isaacson from the Eastwood Community Centre at Eastwood. So I'm really here tonight to thank the council and for the funding opportunities that they've provided to the centre for the last 2 years, and also to provide some insights into the centre and the impact that the council support has actually had on our community. So many of you know I've been the director of the centre since August and have got a personal mantra and passion which is of community and connection. And I know the value that that brings to individuals regardless of circumstance, location and background. So I want to thank council immensely for the financial support over the last 2 years and tonight share some stories from our centre which have been made possible by that support. So since joining Eastwood in 2017, I realised that our beautiful garden was probably the most underutilised area by the centre itself. So when I became director, I set about creating some social community events. I really wanted to bring the heart back to the centre and the community. So I created some social community events, which is some music, and we've got a couple of pizza ovens, and so we've been having music and pizza and some drinks in our back garden. And at the first Sunday Sounds event, we had a lady that had just moved into a street just next door to us from Sydney. Her name was Eleanor, and she knew no one, and so she came along to, you know, like our first Sunday Sounds event by herself. And so I introduced her to a few of my friends that had come up from Strathalbyn, a little bit, you know, just a bit of support. But two ladies came in and they'd been actually living in the in Main Street since for 62 years, and I'd actually never seen them. And so they sort of came in. So I introduced Eleanor to them, and over the time they actually have become really good friends and go to each other's place for coffee. So from the perspective of actually bringing, you know, community actually into our back garden, it was fantastic. So we've hosted many events in our garden, and at each event we see some new faces, which many of them have actually never been to the centre before or knew of the activities that occurred. I just also want to mention another couple of stories. So one of them comes from, we have a long-running disability program called Art and Ability, and a number of the people, they pretty much just come to the Art and Ability class, whereas two of the participants have actually started to come into some of our other activities. So Meredith's been coming to an exercise class and also now starting coming to a cooking program. And 2 weeks ago, Graham, who's another participant, happened to just notice that, you know, from the cooking class there was some pretty fantastic aromas, and so he inquired about the class. So I said for them, you know, him to come along the next week, but I wasn't too hopeful because he'd actually been a bit irregular in his attendance. He doesn't have a lot of support, and so even in his art classes he'd not sort of come along. He'd turned up sort of 10 minutes before. So I'd said to him it started at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the next week I sort of expected that he wouldn't come, and I'd even said to the chef, look, you know, don't worry about setting for him because I don't think he'll come. But sure enough, he arrived dead on 10 o'clock, and it actually spent the afternoon cooking with the rest of the group. So for me, that was just an amazing outcome for him, you know, that I'd never seen him actually attend anything else at the centre before. So being able to actually join in the cooking class has been something that's actually added to his, you know, to his life, you know, life skills. And the other thing that we've also seen is the power of the connection through some of our women's AA groups and our, you know, other support groups. And you know, up until, you know, probably quite recently, they've been very, very insular in, you know, in the activities that they attend. They come along for particular things, whereas a few of them now have started to actually come to our financial literacy for women class and some of the other activities. So they're just a few examples of the, you know, the personal stories that the support that the council has given us over the last 2 years especially, and at the end of the day it actually has a really wide-reaching effect, probably far wider than we actually realise, you know, from a dollar perspective. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne. Councillor Wilkins.
Yes, thank you, Leanne, for coming in this evening and telling us about some of the successes we've had at Eastwood Community Centre. Perhaps you could tell us or give us some insight into the age range of persons who are attending classes and activities at the centre. That's my first question.
Yeah, so I think, you know, traditionally the centre has done a lot of activities sort of for older people, but especially with a lot of the support groups, you know, we now have 8 support groups, you know, ranging from, we have 4 AA groups and we have gamblers. So, you know, we have a range of support groups, which a lot of those are very, very mixed ages. You know, we're seeing, you know, mums come in with babies, you know, and older people. So a real range of people that are actually attending now, and especially some of the social events, like one of the social events that we had, I think there were more kids there than, you know, actual parents, and so it was great to actually see the playground be used as, you know, like at the same time as, you know, like parents could actually come and enjoy a social event. So a whole wide range, Di.
And the demographics, where are people coming from? Is it just the city of Burnside or is it wider afield?
Well, it's certainly a lot come from the city of Burnside, but because we sit right on the edge of Burnside, obviously people from across, you know, across the road in the Unley Council, and you know, there's quite a high population of social housing, sort of like along Fullerton Road. So, you know, and again, you know, like we sort of don't discriminate as to who can walk through the doors and who can't. So, but a lot of the activities that we're actually, you know, running, we're actively promoting in, you know, like back behind, mainly in the our Burnside area.
And can you tell us?
Can we let some other people have a question and then I'll come back to you. Had to.
Thank you.
Right, now, next person is Councillor Turnbull.
You're on now. Yep.
Okay. Right, thank you for sharing those anecdotes. I've got some questions, but I'll do them in twos. And the first one is, how much in assets does the Eastwood Community Centre have?
Well, as you would know, the actual building is owned by the City of Burnside.
Actually, I meant money. Put away.
So I think we've got a cash reserve of about $75,000.
Right. My second question is the $65,000 that you're asking for essential to the running of the centre?
Yeah, it is. The majority of the money, the 65,000, is split up between, you know, some administration, the infrastructure maintenance, actually delivering programs and supporting the support groups that actually come to the centre. For example, the infrastructure maintenance cost that we incur at the centre, most of the other funding that we actually acquire is for particular programs, and so infrastructure maintenance is actually not included in a lot of those the other programs that we might get funding for.
Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. My question is, your community services that you provide under, as you said, programs, SA Health, etc., Alcoholics Anonymous and others like that, with all these programs, do you have like an interaction with other community centres in the City of Burnside? So there's, or are you the only centre in the City of Burnside that does these programs?
So I believe that within the City of Burnside, as far as the support groups, I believe that we're the only community centre that actually provides those activities and, you know, like a space for those activities to occur. As far as some of the other activities that we provide, what's particularly funded through the Burnside funding is not activities that are run in other community centres. So, for example, we run Strength for Life, which I know is certainly run at the Dulwich Community Centre, but our Strength for Life is actually not funded through the City of Burnside funding. So, I've been very careful to ensure that, you know, the funding that is being provided by the City of Burnside is not actually duplicating services that you're providing.
Great. Follow-up question on that point. Thank you. So that's really important for clarifying that. So going forward, would your centre, it's not a council-run centre, it's called something... Independent centre. Going forward, we're looking at all our centres across the city through a strategic planning and so forth. Would your centre then be part of our planning, or would you assist, or, you know, say, well, we're covering Alcoholics Anonymous, so therefore we don't have to do other things, for example, or should we be doing more, for example?
I think, you know, probably the last, well, I know that since I've been director, I commenced in August. I've developed a really great relationship with Martin, and so he and I have certainly been, you know, having discussions about the activities that we run, the activities that the council run. So it's certainly, you know, like I'm looking forward to developing a greater relationship and cross-promotion of activities and, you know, finding out where the gaps are, and I suppose one of the advantages that we have is in being independent, you know, incorporated in our own right. We've got the capacity to be really responsive to community. So if someone walks through my door, and I quite often use the example, if they wanted to learn how to spin around on their head 10 times, if there is another 10 people that wanted to learn that skill, I've got the capacity to be able to go, okay, where can I actually find the funding, or how does that fit with what we are? So I've got the capacity to be really responsive to, to community as fast as I need to.
Great, thank you so much.
Next is Councillor Davey.
Thank you very much for coming along and for all the clarification. I've got two questions, if I might. Do you need the funding for planning on a 4-year cycle for planning and investment reasons? Is that the reason we've been asked?
Yeah, look, I think it was as much, like the last 2 years, we've literally run year to year, and so from a longer term planning to actually have a longer term funding, I know originally the funding request, however many years ago, was for a 3-year cycle, but at that point in time, like it had been quite a while since the council and the centre had worked together from a funding perspective, so it was sort of, year at a time. So I think, from it would be really useful for the centre to be able to forward plan and start to put some other things in place to have that funding period of 4 years.
That's fair enough. And the one function I have been able to attend, I noticed there were quite a few multicultural people there. There was a lot of different nationalities. Yeah. Is that an increasing target of your group? It was lovely to meet some new visitors.
Yeah, it is. As far as staff-wise, we've got an extremely multicultural staff. We have Cambodian, Brazilian, Italian, and me. But yeah, it certainly is something that, we're starting to see more multicultural, especially women. We've started to work more with multicultural women in business and bring them together and create some professional development opportunities for them, but also looking at running some actually cultural fairs. So at the moment we're looking at running I forget what we called it, a Latin, 12 months around Latin America, so Brazilian. So we've started to really engage with quite a few different multicultural groups.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you very much for coming along this evening, and thank you very much for inviting me the other evening. I've lived in Glenside for 20 odd years and had no idea about that oasis in your backyard. That garden is magnificent. What other support groups would you consider taking on at the Eastwood Clinic?
Well, I suppose it's one of the things that the support groups have sort of been an organic. They grew immensely during COVID. Like, we traditionally have had an AA group that have met at Eastwood on a Sunday, I think, for probably 20 or 25 years. But during COVID, what happened is a lot of the other places that groups were meeting closed, and we were fairly quick to open up as soon as we were, the government allowed us to. And so we ended up, during the COVID period, of having 5 AA groups meet at the centre, one every day at lunchtime. And so it's sort of been more a case of they found us to start with, rather than us actually actively going out, and creating support groups as such. One of the things that I've probably noticed, and in some ways it's a bit of a personal thing, is support for families, like with addiction. So, especially like with the Narcotics Anonymous group that come, actually providing some support for the families of addicts, of drug addicts. So that's sort of something that is a little bit of a personal bent of mine, so I'm not quite sure what that ends up looking like and how I create that. But, like I said, traditionally we probably inherited, and provided a space for the groups rather than necessarily going out and actively creating them ourselves.
Thank you.
Sure did that.
Councillor Turnbull.
Oh, hi Leanne, I'm sorry, I've got 2 more. My first one is, as you sit on the boundary of 2 councils, Burnside and Unley. Can you tell us how much Unley Council gives to your, or provides to your centre?
Currently none.
None. But you have 40%, 60% Burnside and 40% other.
Yeah,
right?
correct. And so I suppose it's one of those things, again, you know, I hate to use the, I'm just new here, but it's probably something that I've inherited, that relationship hasn't been developed, which it certainly is something that, you know, we could look at. But I suppose, you know, because we're not actively, you know, like I said, I can't stop anyone seeing a sign on our front door and coming across the road, but we don't actively promote over into the Unley Council area. So, but yeah, there is, they contribute nothing at this point in time, again, probably because I haven't asked them.
Right, my second question of this lot is what would be the impact on Eastwood without the $65,000 from the Burnside Council?
So I suppose, well, from an infrastructure perspective, we wouldn't be able to easily maintain, you know, the infrastructure that effectively is the City of Burnside building. So we would be greatly reduced in being able, because as I said, like a lot of the grants that we receive don't have the capacity for us to actually carry out infrastructure maintenance out of other, you know, other grants. So we would be actually using our, you know, the hall hire, for example, you know, like to be putting into infrastructure. But it would stop us being able to facilitate a lot of the programs that we run. You know, like I would effectively need to be finding funding from somewhere else. And often the funding that we, you know, that we particularly get, so say, you know, if I get funding from the Department of Education, Industry and Skills for adult community education, like they're for very specific programs with very specific outcomes. So often, again, if someone from the community came and wanted to do something that didn't quite fit into that, see, you know, like effectively I don't get funding to provide the, you know, support to the support groups. So it certainly would impact on the centre's ability to continue to, especially from also a community engagement perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Will.
Thank you. Just finally, I wanted you, Leanne, to illuminate to the councillors here what are the external funding sources that you're able to tap into to run some of the programs that we do.
So the programs that Eastwood runs?
Yes.
So we tap into the adult community education, so the Department of Education adult community education program. So that again is for specific foundation skills with very, you know, clear outcomes. Our underpinning funding is from the Department of Human Services, which funds a fair chunk of my salary and, you know, some of the operating costs of the centre. So for the last, well, we've just put in a new tender for that, so that will be, well, touch wood that we get that around $100,000. And then really it's just any grants I happen to find and put in an application for. But again, you know, like they're for very specific, you know, they're for very specific programs. Yeah.
I just want one final question. And I am aware that you do quite a lot with disabled services then. Could you just expand briefly on that, please?
Yes, so we've been running, you know, like, so the Art and Ability art program at the centre. We've actually just, we recognised that there was a gap within sort of the east and the central area for support for disability support providers, and actually to have some sort of a network. So we've just been the instigator of it's called Empower East. So it's a support net, like a network for people within the providing support to the disability sector, but looking at actually running some more increased disability programs. So, running some bus, because we still have the old community bus at the centre, so, actually utilising more to actually, like run some day option activities for people with disability. And
thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it. So we now move to our final deputation for the evening, and that is from Ms. Susie Inat. Please come forward, and I'll turn my mic off and you'll be ready to go.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm Susie Inat of 2 Caithness Avenue, Beaumont, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to make a deputation in relation to item 15.3 regarding the trees that are located immediately adjacent to our house. My husband Henry and I, together with our family, have called the house our home for nearly 16 years. We love living in the city of Burnside, and more particularly Beaumont. One of the reasons for this is the trees and the natural environs. We appreciate they are an important part of the council, and we value them as part of our local area. The trees have been in situ long before we bought our house. We knew they were there when we purchased. One or more of them have from time to time caused concerns for us. This has mostly been related to limb failure and safety concerns given the very close proximity of the largest tree to our house. Assessment and pruning by council has usually resulted. Like all the Aleppo pines, the trees drop pine needles and shed pollen every year as part of their natural cycle. The tree closest to our house, notably, has also always dropped sap. The needles, the pollen and the sap all falls on our house. It's annoying, a nuisance, creates a mess and requires a clean-up, but for the most part we have lived with them. Over the last 3 to 5 years, however, the tree closest to our house has continually exuded an increasing amount of sap. The age of the tree, the increasing number of limb failures and the pruning during this time has resulted in the tree now having a significant number of open wounds. Per the Council's arborist report, this affects the amount of sap falling in 2 ways. Firstly, the number of wounds means there is more parts of the tree for the sap to exude from, and secondly, it's the tree's natural defence to produce and exude more sap when wounded to protect against pathogen success. The tree suffered large limb failures in 2018, 19 and then again in October last year. Significant pruning in January resulted, and as mentioned, the tree now has a lot of open wounds. The wounds range in size from large to small, and the new wounds, which I'll call 3 years or less, do produce and exude more sap than the older wounds. However, the older wounds still produce and drop sap. The result is the tree now produces an abundance of sap and has a lot of wounds from which it drops from. It's the perfect storm. I began to raise specific concerns about the tree and the sap with council last year. The amount of sap falling from the tree onto and around our house had become unacceptable. I also asked on a number of occasions that council actively consider what steps or action it would take to mitigate more sap falling, especially following any scheduled pruning. As I mentioned, in January this year, scheduled pruning took place. Notwithstanding access to our property was required to prune the tree, we were not advised of the date it was to occur. In fact, we were away. The sap fell like rain. Upon finding out that the pruning took place, there is a series of events that immediately and subsequently followed, including various communications with different parts of the council. I don't propose to go into detail about all of those communications. I suspect and hope council is privy to the relevant history. I think it is important, however, to mention that in response to those communications and the commissioning of an arborist report, council decided to paint the wounds on the basis and hope that it would stop or reduce the amount of sap falling on and damaging our house. Without notice, on the 2nd of March this year, after knocking on our door to announce his arrival, the arborist parked his truck in our driveway and proceeded to paint all of the wounds, old and new, with black wound paint. That afternoon, and since that time, the sap that now falls on our house is black. It's on and continues to fall on our driveway, our steps, ours and our friends' and visitors' cars, our rendered house fascia, our roller door. We nor visitors are able to park in our driveway. It falls on our terrace. We can't walk off or onto our property without walking through sap and or actively trying to avoid it. It's on our shoes, our clothes, in our cars, garage and in the house. We've had to move furniture off and can no longer use part of our terrace because of the sap and also the risk of having sap drop on us. We extended an invite to all councillors over the weekend to come and have a look to help with your deliberations, as we feel that photos don't adequately show the impact or damage. We appreciate not all councillors may have been able to attend, so I'm here to make this deputation to hopefully communicate to you the terrible and damaging impact this tree is now having on our family and our house. We're also keen to clean the mess up and repair our house, but unless and until the tree or trees are removed, doing so is not in ours or Council's interests. Finally, Council's urban tree strategy expressly identifies and states that the removal of the pinus species of plants along Caithness Avenue, Beaumont, is part of a tree removal and replacement strategy. We don't hate trees. We do, however, have a problem with this tree, and as I understand it, by possible unfortunate consequence, the adjacent trees. We respectfully request, therefore, that you support the removal of at least the tree, and in line with Council's policy, resolve that it or they be replaced with an appropriate and more neighbour-friendly species. Thank you.
Just made it. Thank you very much for coming in. Questions from anyone? Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sounds like you've got quite a bit of damage going on in your property too. Are you claiming damages from council, or have you incurred costs?
We have had quotes which we have forwarded to council. The cost of removing the current sap is around $8,000, and unfortunately the work required and the product needed to be used to remove the sap will actually remove paint as well, and so we've also had an additional quote to get the paint fixed, and that was about $3,500.
Thank you.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you for coming along this evening. I saw firsthand this afternoon what the tree is causing, and it is significant. It's only one tree, I think, but as you've said in the arborist report, the roots are intertwined or something along those lines, that they're all going to be affected, like they can't just pull one tree out.
So our request was to have the largest tree that's closest to our house removed, but as I understand it, the report is recommending that council consider the removal of all three trees. We asked, in response to reading the arborist report that made reference to the requirement to remove all three trees if you remove the largest tree. When we read that, we asked that council actually challenge that with the arborist, because we're not arborists, but we did have concerns and or query why the other two trees would need to be removed if the largest tree that we consider is causing the problems would need to be removed. But that's a matter that I think you'll need to raise with council administration.
Because the two southerly trees, they look like they're in very good health compared to the one on the northern side.
Councillor Jennings, you need to leave that into a question, otherwise you're really debating. Okay, thank you very much. No further questions? Then I'll thank you very much for coming along tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
They are all the deputations. Now, you are aware that we have a number of issues in confidential mode tonight, and it is my suggestion, I think there is a motion actually. Councillor Jones, do you wish to move a motion in this respect?
Yes, Mayor. I would like to move a motion that we bring items 15.1 and 15.2 forward. Can I briefly speak to that?
Yes.
Colleagues, these are the two things we have to do tonight. We have to progress the budget. Let's do it while we're fresh. We can have a sensible discussion. None of the other items on the agenda need to be resolved tonight. That's been confirmed with the CEO and staff. I think, potentially we could spend, what's the time now? It's 10 to 8. I mean, we could realistically spend 2.5 hours talking about the budget. So let's do it properly. It's the most important thing I think we'll do in this first half of the year. So I hope I have your support, and disappointing that, we might not get to some other things, but the budget is our most important thing. know, I think, because I'm an accountant, but I think it genuinely is. So I hope you'll support me.
Councillor Henchy, you wish to second that, do you?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Do you wish to speak on that?
No, just to say thank you, Councillor Jones.
I'm just going to put that motion now, those who
I
support.
want to speak to it, thank you.
All right, Councillor Davey, I'd started to say
I
that
had
before. I know, but I'd started to speak before I saw your name on there.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank Councillor Jones for his motion. I can't support that. I think we've got some people here who want to hear the decisions relating to their important issues. I think we could deal with probably the first 2 or 3 items and perhaps consider deferring some of the other items. But there are a couple of items that really do need budget money allocated to them in this cycle. So I think I would prefer that we don't just consider the items 15.1 and 15.2 until we have to consider the first 3 items. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Then I will go back to Councillor Jones. You wish to say anything else? Then I'll put the motion. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Those against, the motion is carried. So we will now move to confidential. I need somebody to move that we move into confidential mode. Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Sorry, I didn't have I need you to use your button. So Councillor Jennings and Councillor Turnbull. Right, do you second it? Move into confidential. So that means those people, sorry Leanne, but you will be able to log in and look in, could be another 2 hours time, but you can log in or turn your computer on and watch it from home in the comfort of your home rather than sitting around and waiting here. The others have all gone, so right, thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Seconding.
We're okay, so I'm just going to move, put it to the motion.